Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to episode 5 of Super Kaiju Binge. And today we're going to be looking at the start of, I'm just going to fucking say it, my favorite franchise of all of cinema. With Ishiro Honda's 1954 monster movie classic, the original Gojira. Joining me today is fellow Kaiju fan, Shawnee Boy from JTISREBORN. Make yourself known, boy.
Hey, Jacksonites. JTISREBORN here. I'm very glad to be here, Nick. It's been a while since you and I have done a video. I think the last one was at RoboCop.
Yeah, it was RoboCop.
It's good to be back. As you can probably tell from some of the wind, I'm going for a couple-mile walk while I think it's just easier for me. But yes, I love this franchise. I did a 30-day marathon of it back when 2014 came out. I did a rewatch when 2019 came out. And I do kind of at some point want to go back and do like rewritten reviews on all of them. Because watching those the 30-day marathon, like it's kind of dated.
Yes.
Things have kind of changed, and like even me trying to watch some of them nowadays, I'm like, I could have done this a lot better. So at some point, I will kind of get to that. But yeah, I rewatched both versions of this movie last night, and I'm excited to talk about them. So I'll let you go ahead and get started, and I'll jump in when it's time to.
Alrighty, well, to kick things off,
yeah, drink up. Pepsi Max.
it is Pepsi, actually. Well, it's Pepsi Zero.
Oh, yeah, Coke Zero, Pepsi Max, whatever.
Alrighty, so let's just jump right into our personal history with the original Gojira. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So my original history with the original Gojira, I didn't know really much till it existed till the DVD. Like I bought a DVD set, I want to say like 2010, 2011. So I first got my like Amazon account. So it was a really long time ago, and I didn't see the original Japanese version until about then, because I'd always watched the English version, Godzilla King of the Monsters, featuring Raymond Burr. I had a VHS of it, and then as I got older, I started collecting. I want to say 2010, 2011 is when I really started going out and trying to collect the whole entire series. Then I finally got around to watching the original Japanese version. But the original, I guess not the original, the Raymond Burr version always kind of stuck out to me personally. Because it was really, I don't know if that was my first exposure watching Godzilla, because I've been watching it for pretty much as long as far back as I can remember. I can't remember my first viewing. And same with a lot of franchises. Like I've just been watching them for so long that it's just kind of like been ingrained in me. I think this is the first one I saw, but I can't 100% confirm that. But when I was younger, I would just get a bunch of VHS tapes of the franchise, and you just kind of had like this obsessive nature watching them over and over again. And it just kind of became ingrained into me. So there you go. There's my initial history as I say this, as I'm out of breath walking. But go ahead, Nick.
Well, my personal history with Gojira is a little complicated. The original Gojira was not one of the first Godzilla movies I ever saw. I'd actually venture to say it's one of the last few that I ever saw in full. My first exposure to it was renting it from Netflix. I rented the
Nice.
I rented the, oh god, what the hell was it? Was it Classic Media, I think, released their very first DVDs. They had Terra Mechagodzilla, they had Godzilla's Revenge, they had Mothra vs. Godzilla, titled as simply Godzilla vs. Mothra. And
that's the set I had.
Huh?
I said that's the set I had. It was that Classic Media set. It had like 5 movies in it. So at this one, it had Revenge, it had Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah 3-Headed Monster, Invasion of Astro Monster, Terra Mechagodzilla, and I feel like I'm missing one.
No, it's not that. It wasn't those. It wasn't the box set.
Oh, okay. That's my first exposure when I
It
saw
was
the box set.
it was a set of DVDs that they released before that box set, and they were like kind of badly pan and scanned, and they were like
Mill Creeks.
kind of like Mill Creeks, yeah. Oh crap! What the?
Oh, I remember those sets. Like they were like They just kind of had the English titles on them. They didn't have the Japanese versions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that set was it wasn't the very best of quality.
They're brightly yellow and green, and they had these really badly colored snippets of the poster superimposed on this really cheesy bright yellow and green background, and they had these the titles of the films and the English titles. Those DVD. There are some. I think there are some of the. They also had Rodan as part of that set too. I think that was.
I remember that too. They had Terra Godzilla on the set too.
Yeah, it was Rodan, Terra Godzilla, Godzilla versus Mothra, i.e. the 64 film. Godzilla's Revenge, where they prominently feature Ichiro on the front, and the other one was the original Godzilla King of the Monsters, and I rented that thinking that it was not the original Godzilla movie. And at that time, I was not a fan of black and white movies. I was like maybe 10 or 12 years old. So when I got it in the mail, I watched it and I hated it. Because I didn't like seeing Godzilla as a bad guy. I didn't like seeing a black and white movie. It wasn't the Godzilla that I wanted to watch. So I think I just sent it back in the mail after waiting for it for fucking 6 weeks. Kind of pissed my mom off. But
yeah. Oh yeah, the Netflix DVD. I never used the DVD service. I always just used the streaming.
Okay, so then I have to go grab a prop here.
All right, while he's going off grabbing his prop, just want to say, hope everyone's having a pleasant day. I'm doing long exercise walks, so that's fun. Yeah, so my first exposure to it, like I said, was the original Gojira cut. I didn't see till years later, because I grew up with the Raymond Burr version, and seeing the Japanese version, it was kind of this jarring change, because I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this? Because it wasn't released in the States until 2004. If I recall, the original Japanese cut. So it's kind of a crazy situation.
Well, yeah, I don't believe that it was released until when I was in 5th grade. My dad and my stepmom took me out for dinner. They took me out to Red Lobster. Which, damn, I need to go to Red Lobster again soon. That makes me hungry.
Oh, their biscuits are sweet.
Yeah, their biscuits are awesome.
I always get them from the store too.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I might go there for dinner. I think I might go there for dinner. Thanks for the suggestion, Nick.
Well, we're gonna go to Wendy's, and that's way up my alley. But anyway, huh? Don't bomb, honey. Anyway, so it was at that time when my stepmom bought me one of my favorite birthday gifts that I have ever received in my entire life. And it was, of course, the big classic media Godzilla collection box set. It featured...
That's the best set right there. That's the OG set for me.
It featured Gojira, King of the Monsters, Raids Again, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidra, Three-Headed Monster, Invasion of the Astro Monster, Godzilla's Revenge, and Terror of Mechagodzilla. And I had a massive nerdgasm.
Same here. I remember buying it for the first time and just being so ecstatic to watch these movies.
Now, I have no idea how expensive this was when it first came out. I imagine it was kind of a pretty penny.
It wasn't too bad when I bought it, but like nowadays going online trying to find that set, pricey. I really want to go back and start collecting the various VHSs of Godzilla because there was different dubs that have never been released on DVD. Like Godzilla vs. Sea Monster has one. Like the English dub on like the Good Times VHS. That's the version I want to watch again because the English dub on the DVD is so atrocious. Like this isn't what I grew up with. It pissed me off.
Now, of course, I don't have any of the movie cases left. I just got rid of those and I put them in these cheap ass ones just for convenience. But I do hang on to the box itself because A, it looks cool, but also B, it's just I keep it for sentimental value because it is a cool prop. But But I treasured this thing for a very, very long time. And I know a couple years ago they released like a massively slimmed down version of this thing. It was pretty much just like a thicker DVD case. If I remember correctly, that one was kind of pricey too. But yeah, this is the OG Godzilla collection. And yeah, I treasured this thing for years. And now, the original Gojira wasn't the first one of these that I watched. I'll get to that when I get to that later in the franchise. But there was at one point in time later, I think it was maybe during that summer, when I finally decided, you know what, I'm actually going to sit down and watch the very first Godzilla movie. And if I'm going to be honest, it didn't really have a massive impact on me. Because at that point, I was much more exposed to the type of Godzilla movies that I really liked, especially at the time. Like I've seen all the Heisei movies. I'd seen most of the I'd seen most of the Heisei series, and I'd seen all the Millennium films, and that was more the type of Godzilla that I liked. And this was back when Blockbuster was still alive.
Yes, Blockbuster, Family Video, Hollywood Video.
God, I miss those days.
I miss video stores. They're fun to go out, but they're sadly gone. I mean, there's some that are still left, like kind of small time places, but the days of the old school video stores are pretty much gone.
I miss them a lot.
I do too, because it was nice to get out. You could look at the covers. I just remember going, it was just so exciting to find a Godzilla movie I hadn't seen. I'm like, oh my God, we gotta rent this, gotta rent it.
Yep. That's how I was with my mom. Whenever we went to Blockbuster, we were always renting at least one Godzilla movie. But anyway.
Yeah, I remember I owned several copies of like different Godzilla movies on VHS of the same movie. Like, I had one that was like a 5-set thing and it made Godzilla's face. And I owned Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla like 3 times on VHS. There was like a double pack with Gigan. It was in a 5-pack with several other movies when I watched that for the first time. And then I owned like Cosmic Monster, which is the same thing, but the title card pops up differently.
Boy.
I really want to get these movies on VHS just for the cover art and just for, collector's purposes. And just to hear like the different dub versions too, because like I said, there's versions on VHS that have never been released on DVD in the States.
Well, anyway, so yeah, the original Gojira didn't really leave a massive impact on me. At that time, I was like, okay, it was all right. I've seen the original. Now I can move on. And I actually believe that was the only time that I ever watched the original Godzilla for a very long time. But it wasn't until I was in high school when I was going through another Godzilla phase, and I hadn't watched the original Godzilla movie in a very, very long time. And I finally decided to sit down and give it a rewatch. Now, I watched the movie. I liked it a lot more, but it wasn't until I watched on the disc, there's 2 featurettes about the conception of the original story, and specifically the featurette on how the effects were done for the original Godzilla on the DVD, narrated by Ed Gajisevsky, or however the hell you pronounce his name. And I also noticed there was an audio commentary with Ed Gajisevsky and Steve Reifel. And so I sat down and I watched the original Godzilla with that commentary. I was completely sucked in. I was totally blown away by it. And it made me appreciate the film a lot more than I used to. That being said, now I have seen this movie quite a few times now. I've seen it way more than the original King Kong. It is still one of my least watched Godzilla movies of the entire franchise. That's for a few reasons. So, if anybody is expecting me to come out and just praise the ever-living shit out of this movie and say it's the greatest monster movie ever made, and say it's one of the greatest movies of all time, you might be slightly disappointed, because I kind of view this movie similar to how I view the original King Kong. And Shawnee Boy, I think you might agree too.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat though. Like, I really appreciate what they did for the genre, and its significance can't be understated. That said, though, it's not my favorite.
No, it's not. That's my sentiment as well. I do vastly appreciate this film, and I'm vastly glad that this movie does exist, because if it wasn't for this, I would not be the man that I am. And if it
was, we wouldn't even be talking right now.
Nope, not at all. There's things about this that I will say, though. Well, I do think it is one of the greatest monster movies ever made. I do not think it's one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. I think it's more important for the Kaiju genre as a whole, almost more important than it is for the Godzilla franchise. Because, for the Godzilla franchise, it kind of goes without saying. It's the first of its kind. But I'm also going to say something a little new here, too. To be 100% honest, I feel like the production of this movie is way more interesting than the film itself. Like, I find...
Justice League?
Huh?
So, like the Justice League movie? Where it's like, honestly, like with the Justice League movie, it's like, I want a movie about the making of that movie, more so than the final product itself, because there's just been so much crazy drama and rumors around that movie, and I'm like, this would make for an interesting movie about the making of it.
Maybe for like a different reason. I think that would be a good expose on all the corruption that goes on in Hollywood. But yeah, if I'm being honest, well, I do vastly appreciate this film for what it is, and I do think it is a very good movie, and it's a great monster movie. It potentially is the greatest monster movie ever made, but it's not my favorite Godzilla movie, and it's definitely not one of my favorite monster movies. Even though if I was to make a runner-up list, this would be on it, but it would still be kind of low on it. But yeah, I do think the production of this movie is much more interesting than the film itself, which I don't know if we're going to get into it. We can try if Shawnee Boy's up for it.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and cover the plot like we normally do, give our pros and cons, and maybe afterwards talk about production value or something.
Alrighty, so yeah, let's get into the plot. The plot of this movie is very similar to Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. So let's just get that out of the way, but I do think this is a much better version of Beast of 20,000 Fathoms. When the Japanese freighter Eiko Maru, which is a reference to a real-life incident where there was a Japanese fishing vessel called the Lucky Dragon No. 5 that was too close to a 15 megaton hydrogen bomb that set off, and all the fallout rained down upon the ship, and every single crew member eventually died of radiation sickness later on. That was one of the biggest direct inspirations for this film. But the Eiko Maru is destroyed near Odo Island, and another ship, the Bingo Maru, is sent to investigate, only to meet the same fate with very few survivors. A fishing boat from Odo Island is also destroyed with only one single survivor. Fishing catches mysteriously drop to 0, blamed by an elder on an ancient sea creature known as Godzilla. Reporters arrive from Odo Island to further investigate, and a villager tells one of the reporters that something in the sea is ruining the fishing. That evening, a storm strikes the island, destroying the reporter's helicopter, and briefly seen, Godzilla destroys 17 homes and kills 9 people and 20 of the villagers' livestock. One of the original direct inspirations for Godzilla's rise is hunger. In fact, there was a piece of test footage that showed the Godzilla puppet with a cow in its mouth. However, the the studio executives thought that was a little too gruesome, and they asked that to be cut. Odo residents travel to Tokyo to demand disaster relief. The villagers' and reporters' evidence describes damage consistent with something large crushing the village. The government sends paleontologist Kyohe Yamanei, played by Takashi Shimura, to lead an investigation, who had just got off of doing Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
I still need to watch that movie.
Yeah, same. To lead an investigation.
HBO Max has it, so that's good.
Huh?
HBO Max has it, so that's good. I'll check it out this week or something.
to lead an investigation on the island where giant radioactive footprints and a trilobite are discovered. A trilobite being an ancient species of insect-like life form. The village alarm bell is rung, and Yamanei and the villagers rush to see the monster, retreating after seeing it as a giant dinosaur-like creature emitting a loud screeching roar. Yamanei presents his findings in Tokyo, estimating that Godzilla is around 50 meters in height and has evolved from an ancient sea creature becoming a terrestrial creature. He concludes that Godzilla has been disturbed by underwater hydrogen bomb testing, and debate ensues about notifying the public about the danger of the monster. And while all this is going on, 17 ships are lost at sea. 10 frigates are dispatched to attempt to kill the monster using depth charges. The mission disappoints Yamanei, who wants Godzilla to be kept alive to be further studied. However, when Godzilla survives the attack, officials appeal to Yamanei for ideas to kill the monster. However, Yamanei tells them that he is unkillable, having survived an H-bomb testing, and he must be studied. I kind of honestly have to disagree with Yamanei, because if we have such a big giant threat walking around that shows malice towards us, I feel like something should be done about it to maybe at the moment not kill him, but at least deter him away and just keep him away from us.
Yeah, I agree. If it's going to attack humans, you got to do something to kind of keep them at bay.
Yamanei's daughter, Emiko, played by Momoko Kochi, has decided to break off her arranged engagement to Yamanei's colleague, Daisuke Sarah Zawa, played by Akihiko Hirata, because of her love for Hideto Ogata, played by Akira Takarada, a salvage ship captain. When a reporter arrives and asks to interview Sarah Zawa, Emiko escorts the reporter to Sarah Zawa's home. After Sarah Zawa refuses to divulge his current work to the reporter, he gives Emiko a demonstration of his recent project on the condition that she must keep it a secret. The demonstration horrifies her, and she leaves without breaking off the engagement. Shortly after she returns home, Godzilla surfaces from Tokyo Bay and attacks Shinagawa. After attacking a passing train, Godzilla returns to the ocean. After consulting with international experts, the JSDF constructs a 30-meter tall, 50,000-volt electrified fence along the coast and deploy forces to stop and kill Godzilla. Dismayed that there is no plan to study Godzilla for its resistance to radiation, Yamanei returns home where Emiko and Ogata await, hoping to get his consent for them to wed. When Ogata disagrees with Yamanei, arguing that the threat that Godzilla poses outweighs any potential benefits from studying the monster, yeah, he's kind of right, Yamanei tells him to leave. Godzilla resurfaces and breaks through the fence and goes on a massive rampage, emitting his famous atomic breath, unleashing more destruction across the city, which is easily the best part of the film, in my opinion. Further attempts
the destruction scenes are great.
Further attempts to kill the monster with tanks and fighter jets fail, and then, after a near 15-minute-long rampage, Godzilla returns to the ocean. The day after, Tokyo is completely in ruin. Hospitals and shelters are crowded and with the maimed and the dead, with some survivors suffering from radiation sickness. Distraught by all this devastation, though you wouldn't really be able to tell, Emiko tells Ogata about Sarah Zawa's research, a weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer, which disintegrates oxygen atoms and causes organisms to die of a rotten, liquefied asphyxiation. Emiko and Ogata go to Sarah Zawa to convince him to use the Oxygen Destroyer, but he initially refuses, explaining that if he uses the device, the superpowers of the world would surely force him to construct more for use as a superweapon, which has a lot of merit to it. After watching a program displaying the nation's current tragedy with a massive choir of Japanese girls singing the famous Prayer for Peace song, Sarah Zawa finally accepts their pleas. As Sarah Zawa burns his notes, Emiko breaks down crying, badly. realizing what Sarah Zawa intends to do. A Navy ship takes Ogata and Sarah Zawa to plant the device in Tokyo Bay after finding Godzilla under the ocean. Sarah Zawa unloads the device and then proceeds to cut off his air support, taking the secret of the oxygen destroyer to his grave and giving his blessing to Emiko and Ogata. Godzilla is destroyed, but many mourn Sarah Zawa's death. Yamanei believes that if nuclear weapon testing continues, another Godzilla may rise in the future, giving a not very optimistic ending to a not very optimistic film. So how about this story, boy?
The story itself, I think, works really well. And obviously, you can't not look at a story without thinking exactly what it means, the deeper themes of it. It's obviously they wanted to tell a story about the effects of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but I believe they weren't allowed to do so due to the Japanese censors. So they decided to take that and just kind of interpret it as a monster. It's an allegory for nuclear war. I think it works pretty well. And, it's a simple story to follow. Big monster shows up, wrecks city. We have to try and stop it. But there are a lot of deeper themes and meanings to it, and I think it works pretty well.
Agreed. I think the story is excellently structured, and it's excellently thought out, and you could not have this story any other way. And I give complete credit to, there's so many people to give credit to for executing this film. You have the director, who surprisingly, Ishiro Honda was brought in kind of late into this movie's production. You have the producer, of course, Tomoyuki Tanaka, who was the guy who really came up with the idea for Godzilla. You have the original screenwriter, Takeo Murata, I think his name was. Shit, I shouldn't have. Hang on one second.
Yeah, go ahead, take your time. I'm just sitting down right now, taking a breather while I do this walk thing.
I think it was Takeo Murata.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was right. Well, Takeo Murata wrote the original story, but Ishiro Honda also added a lot more. It was conceived by Shigeru Kayama, but Takeo Murata and Ishiro Honda both wrote the screenplay for this movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, there's so much production stuff into this movie that make it so fascinating that that we should probably talk about. But there's so many people to give credit to for making this movie's story as good as it is. The director, the producer, the writers, even the Akira Fukube for making the music. This is one of those examples of a film where if one element or if one crew member was not present for making this movie, it would not work nearly as well. If you didn't have Ishiro Honda directing this movie, it would not work as well. If you didn't have Eiji Tsuburaya doing the special effects, would not do as well. If you did not have Akira Fukube doing the music, would not work as well.
It's the Jaws effect.
Yeah, it's like a Jaws effect, which surprisingly, Jaws' plot structure is very similar to the original Gojira. I kind of had a similar experience to Bill from Zazubar in that the plot structure to Jaws really stuck out to me as being very similar to Gojira when I rewatched it not too long ago.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is, but I think Jaws is the stronger human characters by far, though.
Oh yeah, if I'm being honest. So that actually reminds me, I need to add something.
Right. Also, we got to talk about Jaws someday.
Oh, I wanted to, but I had to work on the 4th of July.
All right, next year. Because Jaws is my favorite movie.
You have like 5 favorite movies that you cycle through.
Jaws is the number one. Jaws is officially the number one, though. Like, I have favorite movies, but like number one on the list is Jaws. Like, I really had to think that over, but I would put Jaws at number one.
Alrighty, so
all right.
Yeah, this is just one of those movies that it was pure lightning in a bottle. And I do give massive credit to everybody who made this movie. And I actually think this movie came out in the perfect time.
Right.
It was 9 years after the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And at this time, that was still a very touchy subject. It kind of still is to this day, but especially at the time, it was very much so a touchy subject. And we can have our debates until the sun goes down on whether or not we should have bombed Japan. I'm not really going to add my 2 cents into it because honestly, I don't really have anything new to say.
Yeah, it's a very it's kind of one of those dilemmas that they almost kind of touch upon in the movie, where it's just like, because when Sarah Zawa has the oxygen destroyer, it's like you have this awesome power and then you have to use it once, but there are consequences of it. So they kind of touch upon it, where it's like, was it necessary to use it to stop a conflict? It seemed like the only thing that seemingly stopped it, because that's when the Japanese surrendered afterwards. It just seemed like nothing was going to stop it until you did something that was so deadly, but there were a lot of consequences to it. And I think they kind of touch upon that in the movie with the dilemma of using the oxygen destroyer as a fill-in for the atom bomb. So,
yep.
I don't know. It's not. It's a tricky subject to talk about because, well, it did end the war. It's not something to be proud of using.
No, I kind of okay. If you want my slight opinion on the subject matter, well, first of all, World War II is a massive waste of time. I think all of war is a massive waste of time, money, resources, and lives, especially Vietnam.
Right.
Vietnam was the most pointless 15 years in human history.
Right. It's a waste.
It was a massive waste. And that's what I think all war is. If it's to defend yourself, fine, go ahead and fight. But anyone who instigates war, I have no sympathy for. Which is why I do say that because of Pearl Harbor, Japan was in the wrong.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm gonna say that Japan definitely was in the wrong for attacking Pearl Harbor, and I will somewhat defend the U.S. because that was when the U.S. got involved with World War II. Kind of similar with World War I. U.S. was not involved in World War I until one of their ships was attacked by a German, I believe, submarine, and they got involved only in the last year of World War I. World War I went on from 1914 to 1918, and the U.S. got involved early into 1917. World War II went on from 1939 to 1945, and we did not get involved until 1942 when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese. And we were what ended World War II, at least in terms of Japan stuff, when we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After that, Japan just had no answer to that, and they were just like, okay, we're done. So if you want my opinion on that, all war is a waste, and I understand why the U.S. got involved. And on one hand, I think it was kind of necessary to show U.S.'s might, but I think sometimes it was slightly overkill.
Right. It's a horrible thing. War is in general just a terrible situation for everything involved. But I understand why they had to do it, and even like having to do so, like I can imagine it weighing heavily on whoever gave the decision to drop the bomb. Like you have to kind of live with that.
I think that was Harry Truman.
Exactly. It's a horrible thing. I understand why it had to be done. So, yeah.
Actually, I'm not even sure. Anyways, was it Truman or Ford?
I can't remember. I think was it Truman? So.
It was Truman. Okay,
yeah. Like I said, I understand why it had to be done, but it is a horrible thing to have to do. Just like any war in general.
Truman did not seek to destroy Japanese culture or people. The goal was to destroy Japan's ability to make war. Okay, so that I almost want to say that's honorable, but it goes to show that Truman was not looking to completely wipe out Japan. They just wanted to kind of cripple them.
And the conflict.
Yeah, and the conflict. Okay, there you go. Anyway, so let's move on to I don't like talking about war, so let's move on to the movie.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on.
So yeah, that's my 2 cents. There's pros and cons to the situation. It ended the conflict, which was good, but there's a part of me that does think it was a bit of overkill. Maybe they should have just stopped with Hiroshima. Nagasaki, I definitely feel like was overkill. Anyway, so moving on. So what are your pros and cons for the original Godzilla, Shiny Boy?
All right, you want to list them all or just kind of...
Just list them all. Yeah, I think that's my new structure.
Okay, so we'll go into the pros first. And also, I may touch upon the 56 version slightly in these pros because they're like companion pieces to me. So I'll go pros. Pro number 1 is Godzilla himself. Obviously, it's the whole reason we're fans of this franchise, is the big guy. And, you know, he's very different in this movie. And I feel like, well, really, it's the second Godzilla in the franchise we follow for most of it.
Yeah.
And that's the one that, like, has the most character development. I know it's strange to say, but a giant radioactive dinosaur has significant character development that happens throughout the franchise, which I think is really cool and interesting. But like I said, from the look to the appearance, just the sheer like horrors, because this is a horror movie. Like this is straight up a horror movie. Maybe not scary, but there is an eerie presence. Like even watching it kind of yesterday, I just seeing the horrors involved with it. Like it really sticks with you. Which goes into point number 2 for me, which is the visual storytelling. I think the visual storytelling is very strong here. I always kind of go back to the moment where there was that woman, she had her kids there, she's holding on to them, and she's just like, we'll see your father soon. Like that image just kind of stands out significantly, to me at least. It's just this really sad, horrific moment, and you just kind of see the destruction of everything, and then kind of the little moments where you kind of see Sarah Zawa per se, and you have the prayer for peace scene where he's just kind of standing there and he looks at the TV, and he's faced with a really, well, I'll get into next pro, I guess. Next pro, I guess the themes of the movie, just what it's the type of story it's trying to tell. Another pro is the score itself. I think Akira Fukube gave the best score of the 1950s when he did this score. I can't think of any score that, from the 50s at least, that matches the quality of the work done in here. And, you know, obviously, he would do music all the way up to the Heisei era. And he's the best composer in Japan. I can't think of anybody who was able to top him, per se, at least in the Godzilla franchise.
Masaru Sato comes close a couple times.
He comes close. Yeah, I like his score for Mechagodzilla. I think that's his best one. I mean, you had a lot of really great composers. Like, the most consistently good thing in the Godzilla franchise, at least in my opinion, is the music. Even in some of the weaker films, the music can be quite good. At least that's my opinion. Like, legendary, like Bear McCreary's score, fantastic. Who did? Alexander Desplat, his score is great. Even Godzilla 98, I like the music in that. I'm not the biggest fan of that. But it's just, the most consistently good thing in the franchise is the score. I guess next pro would be Sarah Zawa / Steve Martin from the 56 version. I really like the dilemma that, like, I think as a character, Sarah Zawa is the best in the movie. He's faced with, like, this horrible dilemma. Like, he has something that could benefit. In a kind of ways, he's like the guy who discovered the atom bomb in general. It's like, oh, I could use this for the benefit of the world. But at the same time, there's a terrible price to be paid because he knows that it's in people's nature to want conflict.
Yeah, that was Robert Oppenheimer. He was the guy who, I believe, really spearheaded the Manhattan Project and discovered the atomic bomb.
Right, the splitting of the atom. Like
but I don't think there's ever been a movie made about Robert Oppenheimer.
I'm not sure either, but like, you can understand, you can totally see the dilemma that Shirazawa was going through, because wasn't this character a World War II veteran as well? That's why he lost his eye.
Yeah, he is correct.
Okay, but yeah, like he had to face. He knows the horrors of war and what will happen. He's like, As soon as they find out I made this thing, they're going to force me to make another one. And he's like, I can't live with that. I can't be responsible for creating something that'll destroy everything. But at the same time, you understand Ogata's point of view, like, look, this thing is going to destroy everyone. You have to use it. And I understand what you're going through, but this needs to be done. So Sarah Zawa has to make the sacrifice of everything he's researched very hard for, because he thought there would be something good to benefit this thing, this technology that he's developed. It's the same dilemma as the guy who found the atom bomb. That's why he has to ultimately sacrifice himself. He's like, I can't be responsible for this. Like, I'm going to use it once, and that's it. The world isn't ready for this type of power. And I thought that was a very compelling scene, especially when you had the little girl screaming or singing the song, per se. I thought that was quite good.
Yep.
And then it kind of goes in, like, all the pros are kind of linked to each other, per se, in the movie. Like, it's kind of like every little factor that goes into it, you know. The visual storytelling, the themes present in the movie, the score, the story, Sarah Zawa, and Godzilla himself. And in the 56 version, I'll say this, going to that, Raymond Burr is the best actor in both versions, I think, personally, followed by Sarah Zawa and Yamanei, per se, but it's really kind of just those three characters in general. And we have to thank Raymond Burr, too, because without his, like, committed performance, like, because he took the material seriously, Godzilla wouldn't be where it is today. I don't think so, because it's his performance that helped carry that original movie.
Yes.
And introduce it to Western audiences. And I think his narration, in a lot of ways, kind of helps the film.
Oh, his narration is awesome. Like,
right.
One of my favorite lines is, oh crap, what was it? It was the Sea of Fire quote. I'm trying to remember the exact line.
Tokyo's on fire or something?
Godzilla has turned the heart of Tokyo into a sea of fire. Beneath the flames, thousands lie dead or dying. Just like, love it. I love his performance of that line.
Yeah, I think he's really good. Like, he is the best actor in both versions of the movie, followed by Sarah Zawa. And then Yamanei's fine too, because he's a good actor. But the other actors, this is kind of where I get into the cons of the movie. The human characters, they're kind of flat. There really isn't much to them outside of Sarah Zawa or, I guess, Yamanei, per se. Like, he's fine, but he's not like this legendary performance, per se, like Sarah Zawa. Like, Sarah Zawa is by far, he has the most interesting dilemma, most interesting everything going around with him.
I wish you could see my face right now.
What's that?
I wish you could see my face right now, because there's a certain character that I'm going to rip into.
Cons. I hate to say.
Well, hang on. Let's hold off on the cons. I want to get through our pros and then our cons.
Okay, so I think I covered most of the pros. Godzilla, obviously, the visual storytelling is top notch. The themes and like the metaphors, all that stuff is great because it adds a lot of layers to the movie. The score, and I think Sarah Zawa and the dilemma that he goes through, all really great stuff. There's a lot of haunting images in this movie that really stand out. And what it did for the genre, I guess that's kind of the last pro per se I have.
What about the effects?
What it did for the genre. Oh, the effects. Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. That's also a pro. Some bits are a little dated, but
we'll get into that.
The effects, I'll say this. You brought up a good point. The composite effects, I think, work really well for this movie, and I think the black and white really helps the movie. It does a good job with the effects. It was better than a lot of the earlier films did in color, per se. Before they were really, like, they were beginning their craft with this one, and they kind of figured things out more so, and they got better with the composite shots, but I think the black and white really helps disguise the effects. It makes it more haunting.
Yes.
It definitely makes, there's a lot more of an eerie presence to it, and I think the message, too, is pretty strong and powerful for the film itself. So all those are the pros. I do really enjoy this movie. Is it my favorite? No, but we'll get to that when we get to the ratings. But I'll let you do your pros, and then we'll get to the cons.
All right, so I have, let's see, how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 pros. In my original review, I had 6. So yeah. Let's see. Actually, no, I'm going to take 1 away because that has to do it. So I have 8 pros. Pro number 1 is Godzilla himself, of course. Now, I'm not going to pull a Phantasm series and say, like, the tall man is a pro in every single movie that he's in with the Godzilla series. I will only bring up Godzilla when I really do think he's an awesome element of the film. Like, for example, as much as I love Invasion of the Astro Monster, I will not be talking about Godzilla as a pro in that film because he's not in it very much. He doesn't have a huge effect on the story. So I'll only talk about it when either he's very prevalent or I really like his portrayal, like with Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. But definitely here, I would be remiss if I did not talk about him in his first film. For this movie, he's great. Now, this is not my favorite iteration of Godzilla, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I definitely do think this is the most important because he's the very first Godzilla. There isn't a version of Godzilla that is more important to the entire Godzilla franchise, with the possible exception of Shin Gojira, but that's for different reasons. But as we'll find out in the future with Shin Gojira, I kind of have different opinions on that. But the original Godzilla is definitely the most important iteration of Godzilla in the entire franchise. And again, for this movie, he's great. I love his design. Well, the main design, they use 2 suits for this film, but we'll talk about that when we get to the effects. But I love his design. I believe it's called the... Oh, shit. What the hell do they call it? Okay, I have to look this up. Because I know every single Godzilla suit has like a nickname, like 84 Burning Goji and shit like that. Shodai Goji, that's what it was. The Shodai Goji design. Looks good. It looks very monstrous. It just looks good. It looks very monstrous. It looks very imposing. It looks very cold. One of my favorite elements about the Shodai Goji design is Godzilla's eyes. Obviously, he never blinks. And it always looks like he's just gazing down coldly at the puny humans below his feet. He looks completely emotionless. And at the same time, though, he also looks angry, but he also looks sad. Like he hates his existence, but he wants to make everybody around him miserable just as he is. I love his roar. Again, not my favorite Godzilla roar, as I think it's just a little too screechy at times. But for what it is, because originally they wanted to make Godzilla completely silent, but Akira Fukube said that they wanted him to have a roar to signify his pain of being a mutated monster. Which kudos to Akira Fukube for that. So Godzilla's roar is great. His appearance is great. I love his design. Again, not one of my favorites, and this is not my favorite Godzilla iteration, but it's the most important. And for his first outing, he's excellently executed, and he could not have done it a better way. So yeah, pro number 2, if my shit will load. Pro number 2 is Dr. Sarah Zawa, played by the late great Akihiko Hirata, who is easily one of my favorite Toho actors. Dr. Sarah Zawa is very well executed. He's very much so a troubled soul. He kind of like is the Japanese version of Robert Oppenheimer in how he has discovered a potentially new and very much so improved version of a super weapon that would not, collateral damage wise, would probably not be as catastrophic as an H-bomb or A-bomb, but in terms of casualties, I think if the oxygen destroyer actually did become a thing, it would be even more devastating than an H-bomb. Because imagine a 100-mile radius of a oxygen destroyer deployment, wiping out all organic life. It would just be a complete ghost town. especially on land. But Dr. Sarah Zawa, Akihiko Hirata does a great job. He says a lot with just his face, which is impressive because Akihiko Hirata had only 1 or 2 years of acting experience when he was cast as this. And I believe in the original treatment, Akihiko Hirata was supposed to play Ogata. And I'm not sure who decided to switch that. But I definitely think that was for the better. I think as much as I love Akira Takarada, I don't think he would have been able to pull off Dr. Sarah Zawa. So whoever decided to...
This was his first movie, I believe, and he needed more acting experience to really... Because he got better as an actor throughout the series. Because he, as a character, this movie is just kind of okay.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. But whoever decided to switch the actors made a very smart decision, in my opinion. Now, again, this is not my favorite role of Akihiko Hirata, but I definitely do think it's one of his best. Not quite his best. I'm not really sure what I think his best performance is in a monster... Well... No, I think this is his best performance, debatably, but it's not my favorite performance, if that makes any sense at all. But he definitely starts out his career big. So Akihiko Hirata, he does a great job as Dr. Sarah Zawa, and again, he says a lot with just his face. Like when he's watching the report on Godzilla's Rampage, the look on his face is one, like he has... Like he just has the fate of the entire planet rested on his shoulders. And I do think his best acting comes when Ogata and Emiko come to try to convince him to use the oxygen destroyer, and especially when Prayer for Peace starts playing. He says a lot with just his face and his body language. He's like, fuck, I do have to do this. But it can only be on my terms. The only time I think his acting is a little off, honestly, is right before he... this may have been intentional, but I feel like his acting is a little off when he's about to go down in the diving suits to find Godzilla. That may have just been because Dr. Sarah Zawa was out of his element, but I feel like his acting was a little off. He just looks really awkward sitting there holding a diving helmet. Yeah, Akihiko Hirata does a great job as Dr. Sarah Zawa, and I definitely think Dr. Sarah Zawa is one of the most interesting characters in the entire franchise. To be honest, I kind of wish we had a little bit more exposure, because my only slight problem with Dr. Sarah Zawa is that he's introduced in the movie more than halfway through, and he has maybe 15 minutes of screen time in the whole film. So, kind of feel a little bit like it's just a too little, too late syndrome. But what we have with his character is really good, and that makes him one of the best characters of the entire franchise. And I also like that his influence on the series is still felt decades after this film. He's talked about in the next movie. He's talked about off and on throughout the Showa series. He's even talked about in Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. So his legacy certainly does go down, and it has not been forgotten by the filmmakers. So I really respect that.
Even in King of the Monsters 2019, like the oxygen destroyer is still referenced, and obviously they named Ken Watanabe Serizawa, so as a nod to the original. So his influence is felt throughout. So,
which is kind of ironic because more than 65 years after this movie, Dr. Serizawa gives his life to destroy Godzilla, and in 2019, Dr. Serizawa gives his life to save Godzilla.
Yep, I thought that was kind of neat.
So moving on.
Here.
Pro number 3 is I think this movie is paced very well. No scene drags. Everything feels important to the story. Every single scene feels important to this movie's story, its themes, its allegory. Every single scene flows into each other. Not quite like a docudrama, but of a similar nature, where the characters get the plot moving, but also Godzilla gets the plot moving, if that makes sense. And yeah, no scene drags. I'm not sure if I would call this movie kind of a slower burn, but See, it's weird. It's kind of atypical to the typical 50s monster movie story, but it also is very typical of the 50s monster movie story. You have the inciting incident, the investigation, the reveal, the rampage, and the death. But there's a lot of interesting subtext and a lot of plot threads that go into it that make it very atypical to the typical 50s monster movie story. Like, it takes the basic premise of Beast of 20,000 Fathoms and adds a lot of fluff to it, but it's interesting fluff. But yeah, this movie is paced very well. No scene drags. No scene feels pointless. Everything has to be here in order to make this movie as effective as it is. So that's great. Pro number 4 is the ending. Kind of a downer, but in a good way. Now, I've gone on record in saying that I don't really like bleak endings to my movies. If you want to make it a bittersweet ending, that's fine. Like how they should have made the ending to the movie Horns. They should have made that a bittersweet ending by having Daniel Radcliffe survive instead of die. But he dies, and that's my only issue with the movie. But here, it's kind of bleak, and it's kind of just one of those, God, we fucked up type of endings. But it's in a good way. It's a gigantic warning to humanity saying, hey, we need to get our shit together and take care of atomic weapons and take care of them much more seriously. And yeah, it's not very optimistic, which I do like. Not much to say about the film's ending other than I like it. It's kind of bleak. It's not very optimistic. And it works for the film's tone. And it's the perfect send-off to a near-perfect allegory. Pro number 5, I believe, is Akira Fukube's music. Damn. Not my favorite Akira Fukube score. That's way later in the franchise. And I don't think this is even my favorite score of the Showa series. But I definitely do think this is one of Akira Fukube's very best scores. It's definitely in his top 5. I'm not going to say it's Akira Fukube's best because this was his first Godzilla movie, his first sci-fi and kaiju movie, so he was still just getting his shit put out. But he definitely does start his music career on a very strong note. It's haunting.
Absolutely.
It's foreboding. It's creepy. It's entertaining. It's thrilling. It's fun to listen to. It's kind of chilling. It's heartwarming. And it's also heartbreaking. Akira Fukube's score is fucking excellent in this movie. And I cannot give the movie score enough praise. And further proves that Akira Fukube is one of my top 5 favorite film composers in all of cinema. It's actually a list I'll have to put together sometime in the future.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I love film scores, and Akira Fukube is one of my all-time favorite composers. I mean, his score in this movie, like you said, it's absolutely amazing. Is it his best? I don't think so. I like to, from the Showa era, my favorite was probably Mothra vs. Godzilla, but he's done a lot of great scores. Yeah,
not to say it's bad. And no, I don't think it's his best because in many ways it is still very prototypical. And I think that's the only reason why I don't consider it to be one of his very best. It is very prototypical. And this entire movie is one big experiment piece. Just so happened to be pulled off extremely well. But anyway, let's see. Pro number 6 is this movie's themes and allegory. Now, I'm not going to talk about every single Godzilla movie's allegory, only when it's extremely prevalent to the story or it's a massive problem. Ahem. King Kong versus Godzilla. Ahem. But in this movie, it's definitely one of the very best Godzilla allegories, potentially the best of the entire franchise, because at this time, Japan was not really allowed to talk shit about really anything at all, because the Japanese censors and the American censors as well, they did not want Japan to be talking shit about America, which is both good and bad, because, you know, no, I'm not going to get into that. And I absolutely applaud Ishiro Honda and the screenwriters for making Godzilla pretty much a gigantic anti-nuclear weapons message without ever uttering a single word in any which way, shape, or form about saying nuclear weapons suck. It's all done through symbolism. It's like it's an embodiment of the phrase.
Well, I'd argue at the end of the film, Yamanei literally tells the audience straight up, "We keep making nuclear weapons, another Godzilla will rise." But
well, yes, and that may be the only time. Yeah, it may be somewhat referred to, but it's not. They're not. It's kind of tricky because at face value, he's just referring, hey, if we do this again, another Godzilla may happen again. So we need to calm it down. But if you look below that is when you realize Yamanei is saying, you know, if another atomic bomb is dropped, all this human devastation will be happening all over again. And that's not cool.
Right.
So it's a little bit like John Carpenter's The Thing. You can take that film at face value, but you can also look deeper and see further themes and messages. And in here, this is the best kind of allegory, is that you can choose to take the film at face value, or you can look under it and see the themes and messages. Unlike further Godzilla movies that either condescend to you and flat out accept allegory and treat you like an idiot, or it just shoves it down your throat, which is easily the biggest problem with Godzilla versus Ghidorah. But we'll talk about that way later down in Super Kaiju Binge. But
oh yeah, that one literally beats you over the head with it to an extreme.
Yeah, to an extreme. So yeah, here this is easily, if not the best, it's in the top 5 of the best executed themes and allegories of the entire Godzilla franchise. Because Godzilla is just a walking atomic bomb. Everywhere he goes, it's death and destruction and burned and maimed humans and destroyed buildings and radiation all over the place. And Godzilla's atomic breath is an atomic explosion, which is odd because this is one of the weakest incarnations of Godzilla's atomic breath, but whatever. It works for this film, just like this Godzilla works for this film. So yeah, the themes and allegory, I mean, it's not no secret what it is. It's anti-nuclear weapons. It's a kind of a protest piece against Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's also a big protest piece against a lot of imperial, outdated Japanese traditions. Like, you know, you have to arrange marriages and you have to consult the fathers in order to wed, and all this censorship and shit that was going on. All these outdated imperial Japanese traditions that were becoming quickly outdated, and all these changes that Japan was going through at the time, which some were protest piece and some were supporters of. The theme and allegory is very, very well executed. And it's not shoved down your throat. If it was shoved down your throat, I don't think this movie would have been nearly as good as it is. But it's not. Ishiro Honda is a master of subtlety, and he knows how to make his allegory, well, with a couple exceptions in later installments of the franchise. But when Ishiro Honda is serious, he knows how to be subtle with his allegory. And here, well, again, I don't quite think it's his best work. He does start out his career very strong. So the themes and allegory in this movie are very, very well executed, and they still kind of ring true to this very day. Pro number 7 is Godzilla's Rampage. Wow. One of the greatest giant monster rampages in all of cinema history. It's entertaining, but at the same time, it's kind of horrifying because, well, Godzilla has three scenes, three and a half scenes. There's his appearance. There's his first rampage, which is only like 3 or 4 minutes long. And then, well, no, he has 4 scenes. Then there's the big rampage, which I think is like almost 15 minutes long. And then there's the ending where Godzilla dies. Easily the best part of the movie is the second rampage. Godzilla just fucking obliterates and tears Tokyo to shreds, stomping buildings left and right, maiming humans left and right, incinerating entire city blocks with his atomic breath. One of my favorite parts is when he's getting through all the high tension wires, and the reveal of his atomic breath is a great surprise. All you hear is explosions and tanks firing, and then it cuts to the iconic sound effect of his atomic breath, and you see everything just melt away all next to him, which is a cool effect. We'll get to that in just a minute. But and then Akira Fukube's music starts back up, and he just starts tear-assing his way through the city, and it's great spectacle, and it's very entertaining. But at the same time, it's very bleak, it's very horrifying, and it kind of just leaves you there. Like, you don't cheer Godzilla on. Even though you're entertained, you don't really cheer Godzilla on. You're just sitting there in awe watching him tear ass his way through the city. It's kind of almost like a car wreck. It's horrifying to watch, but at the same time, you can't even look away. The Godzilla's Rampage scenes, they're very entertaining. And this leads me into pro number 8, the special effects. Especially for their time, the special effects are outstanding. The miniature sets are very well made, very well constructed, and they're very well detailed. The composite effects, for the most part, are very good. Now, keep in mind, when you watch this movie, this was a big, giant experiment piece. This was the very first time that something like this had ever been done. We're not taking into account the 30s Japanese King Kong movies. I'm aware of their existence. I have not seen them, and I know very little about them, so we're not going to talk about those. But officially, as far as we're concerned, the original Godzilla was the very first big monster movie to be made in Japan, and where something like this was ever done. So yeah, this movie is a big, giant experiment piece. So if you're going to critique this film, you need to take that in mind in saying that, yeah, this is the first time this was ever done. Do I think that the special effects here are the best of the entire franchise? No. But kind of like with Fukube and Honda, they do start out the career very, very strong. Because like I said, the suit, the Godzilla suit itself, they had 2 suits for this film. The prototype suit looked good, but creating the thing, to quote Ed Gajaszewski, was lots of trial and mostly error. The very first Godzilla suit was almost unusable because the material that they used to create Godzilla's skin was a very prototype-ish type of rubber stuff. And when it hardened and cured, it was hard as a rock. So the Incredible Suit was the Incredible Suit, totally. The first suit was incredibly stiff, and Haruo Nakajima could only be inside that thing for a few minutes at a time. And poor Haruo Nakajima. In this first movie, he had a real massive hard time with this thing. Because, Shiny Boy, did I lose you?
No, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, poor Haruo Nakajima, he got the shit kicked out of him doing this suit. The very first suit was almost unusable. Now, they did end up using it. They cut the suit in half, and they used the head almost like a hand puppet. And for scenes when you could only look at Godzilla's legs stomping about in the city, Haruo Nakajima wore the bottom half of the suit with giant suspenders, which was much more feasible for Haruo Nakajima because it was only just his legs so that he can move around much better in the thing. But the second Godzilla suit, which is this design here, was the main suit that they used when Godzilla was fully on screen. It still was incredibly stiff, and it was so stiff, in fact, that it could be just left alone to stand by itself with nothing to prop it up. And Haruo Nakajima couldn't really move around very much inside the suit. He can really only move in a straight line. The minimal mouth movements were executed via wires to make Godzilla's jaw close. There was a little bit of stop motion in the movie to make Godzilla swing about his tail to destroy the Michigeki Theater. And of course, there was wireworks used to move around Godzilla's tail. And yeah, poor Haruo Nakajima, the inside the suit, it was so hot with all the studio lights and the studio fires all throughout the set. Inside the suit, it easily reached up to 130 degrees. And Haruo Nakajima passed out inside the thing on multiple occasions. And the suit was so stiff. Was rough. And inside it was very rough too. And because he was sweating so much, he got multiple abrasions and sores and muscle cramps. And more than a cup of sweat could be poured out of the thing after each use. I wouldn't be surprised if Haruo Nakajima... Huh?
I said Haruo was a very tough guy, though.
Yeah. I have a massive amount of respect for Haruo Nakajima. He did this suit acting for close to 20 years. And he never really complained. And on the very rare instance, he was injured. And through all that, he just kept going and kept going and kept going. So
yeah, because he was like, if he complained, he's like, I'd be out of the job. So he just kept on pushing.
Yep.
So I commend him. He said his favorite work was in Gargantua, though, as Gojira. That's because he got to use his eyes.
Yeah, it's true. Well, it's one of the few good things I have to say about that movie. But no, yeah, the special effects, if you look at them and compare them to modern stuff, of course they're not going to hold up. But I really feel like if you compare the effects to modern stuff, I feel like you're just trying to critique this film, and you're not trying to appreciate this movie for what it is. There are some aspects.
Hold up to today's standards. In terms of that, like some things are definitely like dated and like, but it is like you said earlier, prototypical.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that you can take away from this movie. You have to keep in mind that this movie is extremely prototypey and it's extremely experimental. It's an experiment that paid off, thank God. But I will be talking about a couple elements of the effects that I don't think, even for the time, were well executed, which we will get into now. What do you have any other cons for this film?
Okay, so yeah, because I'm going to have to go on a little bit, but I'll go ahead and get into the cons. So con number one, I'll have to say the pacing at times can kind of drag the movie. I know you said you didn't agree. You thought the pacing was very well done. I think at times it kind of drags. And well, maybe the pacing is tied into my other con, which is the human characters at points. Like, Emiko is a drag on this film. She's not that interesting of a character. Ogata is kind of the same way. Like, I understand, like, his point of view. Like, he works well in the debate versus Sarah Zawa, but, like, as a character, like, there isn't much to them, per se. A lot of the human story elements kind of fall flat compared to, like, other films in the franchise, like Mothra vs. Godzilla has a very good human cast, and the human story is interesting outside of the monsters. And
Invasion of the Astro Monster.
What's that?
Invasion of the Astro Monster. Actually, the human characters are the best part of Invasion of the Astro Monster.
Exactly, and
debatably,
that element of the story works very well. And I think that's kind of an issue with the 54 film is the human element. It's kind of like Shin Gojira, where it's like the human element really drags the movie down.
It's worse in that movie.
Yeah, it's not good in that movie. And, you know, I know a lot of people love the movie, and I really enjoy it too, but the human element isn't good. I mean,
I'm gonna have a field day with that film, but that's way later in the franchise.
Yeah, like really kind of my only complaints, pacing at points, and I think a lot of that could have to do with the human characters. They're kind of linked together. I praise the special effects for their time, but some bits are a little questionable. But again, that's not much of a con per se, because I understand like this came out in 1954, like they don't have what they have today. And another con kind of has to tie with the 56 version. And again, I appreciate both versions, but like the con with that version is that the Steve Martin scenes seem out of place. And the reason I'm talking about that is because I consider them companion pieces and that they link up together. So
fair enough.
Other than that, I don't really have too many cons with it. I think it holds up quite well, and it is a very significant movie.
Alrighty, so I have. Let's see. I have 3 cons with this film. Yes, I agree. Con number 1, we'll talk about a certain character as its own separate con. But I will say that most of the human characters are kind of weak. The least of which is Takashi Shimura as Kyohe Yamanei. I think he might be the second most interesting character in the whole film because you kind of sympathize with him. In the original screenplay, he was a lot more unlikable. Like he was borderline a mad scientist. But here they really they downplayed the unlikableness and the bitterness of the original Dr. Yamanei. But you can still see that sometimes I get the feeling like he almost wants to ignore the fact that Godzilla is a walking threat and all he wants to do is just study him for scientific gain, which kind of reminds me of the crazy scientist in the original Thing from Another World. But I do get the sense that Yamanei towards the end of the movie does acknowledge that, yeah, Godzilla is a problem. But I feel like there's a couple scenes where Dr. Yamanei is just kind of throwing a bit of a tantrum that the government has decided, yeah, look, we see him as a threat, so we need to do something about him. But it's understandable, but not completely agreeable. Akira Takarada as Ogata. Now, in the context of the film, in terms of the debate of using the oxygen destroyer against Godzilla with Dr. Sarah Zawa, that stuff works. But other than that, I kind of feel like Ogata is kind of a boring character.
Right, he only works for that debate scene. The rest of the movie, like him and Emiko are really uninteresting.
I may as well just jump into it. Okay, I think, in my opinion, the weakest element of this movie is Momoko Kochi as Emiko. She's a bad actress. I'm just going to say it right now. She's a very bad actress. In every single movie that I've seen her in, she's bad. And this is...
Okay in Destroya. Is she the same actress in Destroya?
Yeah, she came back for Destroya. Now, I feel like that may be her best performance because she's really bad in the Mysterians, too. Woof.
I haven't seen that, but I look forward to watching it.
Woof. There's one scene near the beginning of the movie. I'll just say it involves a kidnapping where you will just laugh at how cringy it is. But we're talking about Gojira here. Momoko Kochi is the weakest element in the original Gojira, in my opinion, because her acting is bad. Her acting, in my opinion, is really, really, really bad. The expression on her face, she kind of has Fay Ray syndrome. She's completely deadpan. She's never even looking directly at... There's many moments where she's on screen with Ogata. She never really looks him in the eye. I don't buy their romance. I really don't.
Buy it either.
And that's the weakest element of Akira Takarada's acting in this film. I just don't buy their romance. I don't buy them as lovers. I don't buy them as being romantically interested in each other at all.
You know what? To be honest, I bought his chemistry more with Glenn in Invasion of Astro Monster than I did with him and Emiko.
I know, right?
But yeah, like there's no good chemistry. There's none at all. It's so flat.
And that may be the fault of Ishiro Honda, because Ishiro Honda did state that he did not like showcasing romances on screen, which, I mean, I can kind of relate because I would be in that boat too. If I was to ever be a director, like, I would never want to, to be a little raunchy here, I would never want to film a sex scene. I would not want to. I put myself in, though, I put myself in actors' shoes. Doing a sex scene for movies has got to be awkward as fuck.
Yeah, you got a bunch of strangers around you. You have to, like, do things. It just seems super awkward and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would never, ever want to put any of my actors through that kind of shit, which is why I would never do romances.
If I did, it'd have to be more of, like, kind of a sweet, innocent type deal. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Something nice and touching.
Yeah, that's fine too. But that's why Ishiro Honda is very good at showcasing friendships. Again, like Invasion of the Astro Monster. But yeah, I just don't buy their romance. I don't buy their chemistry. And Ogata kind of comes off as a bit of a homebreaker.
Yeah, he kind of does.
And yeah, Momoko Kochi's acting, it's really bad. Her face is really deadpan. All of her lines are delivered very flatly and monotone, and there's no emotion into her performance. And she always looks uncomfortable when she's on screen. She always looks like she's really awkward and really just uncomfortable throughout the entire movie. And Momoko Kochi is the worst element in this movie, and she's really the biggest reason why I don't come back to this movie as often as I'd like to. And yeah, she's the weakest element. I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna give it. Anyone out there is gonna call me this asshole, fuck off.
I heard was it Kumi Mizuno, who's great in her movies?
Oh yeah, Kumi Mizuno is awesome in any movie that she's in.
Yeah, she's great in every single Toho film I've seen her in. So
yeah, Jun Fukuda definitely was way better at directing female characters in his films, in my opinion.
Right. Outside of I think Katsura was kind of interesting in Terror.
We'll get to that when we get to it. So yeah, that's all I have to say about the original Godzilla. Any final thoughts, Sean?
I mean, we wouldn't be here talking about this franchise without this movie. I understand its historical significance. It is a good movie. It is. Is it my favorite of the franchise? No. Even upon rewatching it, and I know some people will probably find it, but it's the best. It's the best. I'm like, well, I can't call it the best because there's elements that kind of drag it down that aren't.
Oh, wait. There's one more con. I just remembered this. Okay. Con number 3 is there are a couple aspects of the special effects that are pretty dated. Yes, we all know of that one scene where you can see Godzilla's tail through a busted building and you can clearly see the wires holding up the tail. We all know of that. So yeah, the wire effects for Godzilla's tail, they're not the best. But again, keep in mind this is a big experiment piece, and they're not going to land everything right. I think the worst effects in this film, honestly, are the composite shots. Because there's lots of moments where Godzilla is... Probably the best, though, is when you see Godzilla against the Japanese diet building. That's a decent composite shot. But, like, there's one really bad composite shot that stuck out to me. When Godzilla was walking towards the big tower that was flashing all those lights, you just see Godzilla as this big blob against the background, and it really sticks out like a sore thumb, in my opinion. And I think that's the worst effect done in this movie. Couple of other effects, like the Godzilla suit, the prototype Godzilla suit doesn't look all that great. It looks kind of like a frog, and the jaw is kind of warped. His lower jaw is kind of warped. And there's couple moments.
That one shot where it's kind of like a puppet in the background that doesn't look very good.
No, yeah, there's that too. It works to showcase Godzilla's size, but other than that, like its design is what kind of kills me.
Right.
So yeah, there's some elements of the effects that aren't that great. Though again, try to keep in mind this was a big experiment piece, but you're still not going to land everything on your first try. Though again, like I said, with Honda and Fukube, they start out the series strong, which is good.
Right.
So yeah, final thoughts. Go ahead, Sean. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay. Well, I understand the film's historical significance, and I do appreciate the film for what it is. Like, we wouldn't be here talking about this franchise without it. There's a lot of great moments. I love how dark it is. There's like some really haunting moments within this film. I love the score. I love Godzilla. I like the stuff with Sarah Zawa and his dilemma. But there are elements that do drag it down. The human element, we talked about it. It's kind of a weak point. It really is. And again, this is a great movie. It's very significant. And some people may get upset that it's not my favorite. I don't think it's the best because, like I said, there's the element that drags it down, which is the human element to it. It could be so much better, but it's not. And again, there's elements, again, because Honda wasn't very good at doing romance, so it just fell flat. Like, it fell flat in that area. That is a weak point, and I can't ignore that, despite the film's historical significance and, you know, the allegories and all that other stuff involved. But I do really appreciate this film. I especially also appreciate the stuff with Raymond Burr and the 56 version. Without both versions, like, Godzilla wouldn't be where he is today. I think both versions are important. They're historically significant. And they gave us arguably my favorite franchise of all time. I love it. You love it. We're all fans here. And it all started with this movie. So I really appreciate it. I love the score. I love so many elements to it. It has some weak points, but I'm willing to overlook some of those. And I still enjoy the movie. So there you go. I really love the movie. That's all I can say. It's great. It's good. It's good.
Alrighty, so my final thoughts. Honestly, a lot of what Sean did say, yes. If it wasn't for this movie, the world of cinema would be very different. And if it wasn't for this movie, I would be a very different man. I wouldn't know Sean. I wouldn't know Ryan. I wouldn't know Trev. I wouldn't know, debatably, Jack, though there's King Kong for that too. I would not be the man that I am today. And I would not have my all-time favorite franchise if it wasn't for this movie. All that being said, this is not my favorite Godzilla movie. This is not one of my favorite monster movies. Do I think it's one of the best monster movies ever made? Absolutely. Yes. Do I think it's one of the best Godzilla movies? That's really debatable. That is very much so a giant debate. So I'm actually not going to answer that question. I really do find it a massive cop-out when everybody and their mother just says the original Godzilla is the best. The original Godzilla is the best. The original Godzilla is the best. It's the best of the entire franchise. I really don't like discuss. Like, if somebody was to ask me, what do you think is the best movie ever made? I say you need to reword that question and you need to ask me, what is my favorite movie ever made? Because there is no answer to the question of what is the best movie ever made. Because there is no answer whatsoever. There is no best movie ever made. Even Citizen Kane, which so many people just shove down your throat and shove it up your ass, saying that it's the best movie ever made, God damn it. Or they'll say The Godfather is the best movie ever made. Or they'll say Rear Window is the best movie ever made. There is no best movie ever made. Film is subjective. Art is subjective. Right. Now, if somebody says the original Godzilla is their favorite Godzilla movie, I'm fine with that. That's your opinion. That's a subjective opinion. Which is why I think it's a massive cop-out that Brendan Tenold put the original Godzilla as #1 on his top 10 favorite Godzilla movies. He didn't say it was his favorite. He said it was his best. And to this day, he keeps saying, I like Godzilla 1974 a lot more than the original Gojira, but I still think that Godzilla 1954 is the best.
Yeah, your favorite is your favorite. It feels like when you say something's the best, but it's not your favorite, it feels kind of like lying in some ways. It's like
just like you're going along with the general consensus blindly, which I refuse to do, as people so painfully know with me.
Right. It just feels like you're saying that just because, like, you're saying that because people are kind of forcing you to have to. So, which is why I agree with you that, like, I have to do like favorites. Like, it's a tricky scenario, but again, I won't say something is the best because I'm like, I don't agree with it. It's not my favorite. So, like, you can argue certain things are better about it, like, but I don't think that automatically makes it the best.
Correct. So. Yeah. So, well, yeah, I do appreciate the original Godzilla movie for what it is. I do like this movie. I enjoy watching it. It has a great audio commentary. I'll certainly give it that. But it's not my favorite Godzilla movie. It's not my favorite monster movie. And it's not one of my favorite films. Though I do see it as a very important film and a very, what's the word?
Significant.
Thank you. It's a very significant film. But since I decide to rate movies purely personally now, I don't do dual ratings anymore. Like, objectively, it's this, but personally, it's this. I'm not doing that anymore. This is purely my opinion, because while I do care about other people's opinions, at the same time, I also don't. I only care about positive opinions. And if you're gonna get uptight about my opinion, then I just don't need to. I don't need to listen to that, for the most part. Which is why my final rating for the original Godzilla will be a 7 out of 10. It's a good start to a great franchise, but while it starts out strong, I do think there are Godzilla movies that get better.
Yep.
So what's your rating?
I'm going to go slightly above that. I'm going to go a 7.5 out of 10.
I debated that myself, but the weak aspects of the effects, the weak characters, and Emiko really did bring it down for me. So it's a 7 out of 10 for me.
Again, I have to just based on, like, okay, I watched it. I'm like, I understand significance, and I really enjoyed the film. And I personally, I think between both versions, I think I like the King of the Monsters version. Like, although there's some some themes that are lost in between it, and that is a bit of a downgrade, and the fact that Steve Martin doesn't really feel organically integrated as much.
Nope.
But he is a more interesting character to follow than the other leads. Like, he is a better actor than some of the other performers.
Okay, I may as well throw Sean a bone and give my very brief thoughts on the original Godzilla King of the Monsters. I mean, technically, I did watch King of the Monsters before the original Gojira, so you could say I have a little bit more nostalgia for that cut. I honestly do believe, though, that the original King of the Monsters is 100% obsolete. Maybe that's because, like, it cuts out all the interesting fluff of the original, and it's just a much more streamlined movie, which is good for some, but in my opinion, that doesn't make it nearly as interesting. That just makes it blend into the crowd of 50s giant monster movies, which that's what the filmmakers are trying to make it into. They're pretty much trying to make it another version of The Beast in 20,000 Fathoms. It has the same runtime as that film as well. The only reason to watch King of the Monsters is for Raymond Burr. All of his scenes are great. His acting is good. His lines are awesome. But yeah, he does not feel organically integrated into the film. And god damn, does it have some horrendously dubbed lines. They had only 3 dub actors for the film. 1 female, 1 young male, and 1 older male. And they flip-flop between the older and younger male between characters all the time, which gets really confusing and jarring. And the dubbing is just fucking terrible. So I don't think it's a bad movie. I just think it's obsolete. And there's no reason to really watch it when you have the much more better and interesting film that is the original Gojira.
Right, but like you have to respect both of their significance.
Sure.
I feel like.
So I do recommend the original Godzilla. If you are a Godzilla fan and you have still to this day have not seen the original, you need to rectify that. At least watch it once. If it's not your favorite, that's fine. But I still say you should watch it at least once.
Mm-hmm.
And with all that being said, that's all I have to say about the original Godzilla. Sean, you got anything to plug?
Damn, we talked for a long time on this one. Things to plug, you guys can check out my channel at JTISREBORN. I just did a review on Halloween 2018, which was a lot of fun to do. I think Nick still has to watch it, but that's the most recent thing. Right now, I'm on a little bit of a break for myself, so I'm going to probably plan on making some videos while I'm on my little vacation. Definitely check out Nick's other videos. I think, what's the next one we're doing, Nick? Is it Rodan?
With you and me?
Yeah.
I believe it is, yeah.
Yeah, because you're doing raids again with someone else.
I'm doing raids again with Ryan.
All right, cool. I'll have to definitely check that thing out. But yeah, so that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I'm just going to talk about other stuff. But it was fun talking the original Godzilla. God, I was walking for I did 6 miles while we were talking. So that's, I'm kind of drained at this point. And,
good for you.
I should learn not to walk in jeans because it definitely rides up and it's not comfortable. So, too much information, I know, but I felt the need to say that because I'm just like, oh God, I'm very uncomfortable walking out. So, because when I did the live streams, I was talking with Jack, I was wearing shorts and it was so much more comfortable, but do not walk long miles in jeans, everyone. Put some sweatpants on. It's much better. But yeah, that's all I got to plug. I really enjoyed talking about this movie with you. Again, I sounded out of breath. I'm sorry about that. And my thoughts sometimes are scattershot when I'm on the fly, and sometimes I really have to sit down and think about things. But I do appreciate 1954 a lot. And watching it yesterday, I love the grim nature of it. But again, it's not my favorite one to watch. Definitely in the original franchise. And it's kind of tough for me to pick my favorite Godzilla movie per se. In terms of the Showa era, there's 2 that I think are probably my favorites, and that's Mothra vs. Godzilla and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I think those 2 are my favorite of the Showa era. Upon rewatching things, I always kind of go back to Mothra vs. Godzilla because it has a more interesting human element, and the score I think is better. Godzilla's still menacing, and then Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla because, well, I fucking love the simians, and I just love Godzilla so much. But we'll get to, I think I'm the guest on those reviews too, so we'll definitely have to talk about that when we get to them. But thanks for having me on, Nick. I really appreciate it. And I guess I'll have to get going. Everyone have a terrific day. Subscribe to Nick's channel. I know I shared a link on my channel for people to check it out. But this is fun.
Alrighty. So as always, go post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. And share this video with your friends. And as always, go out and if you come across a giant dinosaur looming over you on a hill, hide. And I will see you guys in the next video. Shit, I forgot.